right, Stromberg, you've made your point. How much do you want?
Whatever do you mean, Mr. Bond?
The price for not firing those nuclear missiles.
I'm not interested in extortion. I intend to change the face of history.
By destroying the world?
By creating a world.
Welcome back to Ranked. I'm Charles.
I'm McCurdy.
I'm Scott.
I'm Nathan.
Perfect. Yes. The Spy Who Loved Me brings 007 back into the Cold War following the disappearance of an American space capsule hijacked mid-flight by a mysterious enemy missile. Bond must locate the missing spaceship before the Americans... Oh, hang on. I got my notes mixed up. Hang on.
Almost the right movie.
Following the disappearance of a British and a Russian nuclear sub hijacked while out to sea. That's right, okay. Bond's mission is to find the missing subs by working alongside his opposite number in Russian intelligence, the sexy female agent XXX. Gee, I wonder where that goes. Turns out the man who stole the subs wants to bring about the nuclear annihilation of the world so that humanity may begin anew, living under the sea, fucking dolphins, and creating a human-dolphin hybrid. The next step in the human evolutionary chain. This ultra-intelligent Dolphumanoid species will then take over this newly created Waterworld and one day take to the skies, eventually discovering faster-than-light travel so that they may populate the galaxy and conquer the known universe.
Are we going to take this movie seriously?
Right, and
I did not.
that could be his only motivation, right? I mean, what else is this guy's motivation?
I did not watch the same movie.
No, me neither.
I missed
Charlie,
all of
what were you on when you watched the movie? Buddy?
Yeah.
I smoked all the drugs.
This
This movie's awesome.
This movie is awesome.
LSD.
Oh my God.
McCurdy, why don't you go ahead and
I'll
tell
take
us
it from here.
Yeah.
Not bad. I'll take it from here. So many episodes, gentlemen, many episodes ago, back when we were talking about Thunderball, we talked about the legal battle over that film and how that film would affect the franchise going forward. Well, here is the next stop in those chain of events. So originally this film was supposed to feature Blofeld and Spectre, and it's very obvious when you watch this movie how many times there's some Blofeld antics and how Stromberg is basically a stand-in for Blofeld.
That makes sense because of the obvious "you only live twice" connection, but like you'll get to that, I guess.
There's a lot more connections to the other films in this movie. This is one.
Okay.
We'll talk about it later. But
Yeah. A
So
guy
our
sitting at a
good
desk
friend-
hitting buttons to kill people. Is,
our good
yeah.
friend Kevin McClory, who was already planning his initial contractual agreed upon remake of Thunderball, had put an injunction on Eon Productions, which we remember Eon Productions is Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Salzman, to use the iconic character or iconic character in this case.
I'll drink for you.
is-
Iconic.
You know, it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that word a lot today.
What the hell are you drinking?
Root beer. No, it's not root beer. It's Dr. Pepper.
And Nance is drinking water, and then I'm like,
You're the alcoholic today. So this delayed the film from being made for 3 years after the previous film. On top of this, Harry Salzman was going through some financial problems. He had a gambling issue. Also, his wife was terminally ill with cancer. So he had decided to sell his shares, not to his partner Albert R. Broccoli, but instead he sold his shares to United Artists, which this kind of made Cubby and their relationship kind of strained for a lot of reasons.
is he credited on this?
No, he's not. So Harry
So this is the
Salzman,
first
this is
one.
the first. So going forward, gentlemen, you'll see Albert R. Broccoli as the sole producer until he passes away sometime in the 90s.
So they didn't have a fight or anything. It just like Harry's life went to...
They may have had a fight. Like I if you watch the Eon Everything or Nothing documentary, they kind of talk about this more. So I would check that
Okay.
documentary out if you want to know a little bit more about the producing side of this film. It's also interesting to note that Fleming, before he had died and when he had sold the rights to Eon, to not use the plot in this book. And what's also ironic is that because he had kind of maybe learned his lesson with Thunderball. He had given story credit to somebody who actually helped him write the book version of it, which is nothing like the movie at all. So they didn't use any plot elements except for one, which brings me to my next thing, because I know, Charlie, all of you guys have a lot of questions about this. The films brings into the fold, probably, depending on who you ask, either the first or second most iconic henchman in the James Bond series, Jaws. Yeah, we're gonna toast to that. 7 foot tall, 7 foot 2 inches, Richard Kiel.
I have
Now,
one
Kiel-
question about this. A singular question.
I'm getting into it.
Okay.
I know your question.
You know what my question is?
Go ahead and ask me the question, because I'll answer your
Okay.
question. How about that?
Jaws comes out in 1975.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about the Spy Who Loved Me book.
Yeah.
Is Jaws, is he a completely original character?
Yes and no.
Jaws.
Wait, 1977.
Yeah.
This movie comes out in 1977, and then 75
He's
is
not
Jaws.
called
So like
Jaws, right, in the book, or
No. So
But
there.
the
And then, well, and
character-
then,
So hold on.
So Jaws,
hold on,
but then
hold on.
soon, like later, you kind of notice
Yes.
some more Jaws references. So you're like,
So hold on. We're getting there.
Yeah.
So as we have talked about, pretty much after On Her Majesty's Secret Service, every Bond film here on in, the whole spy thing kind of goes away as far as it being in the zeitgeist. And so every movie from here on out, from the Live and Let Die onward, has something that was popular at the time that they try to incorporate into the movie because that thing was popular. At the same time, though, there's a character in the book named Sol Horowitz, and he also has metal teeth in the book.
wait, 3 names?
Sol Horror as in like
Horowitz.
his nickname, Horror.
Oh, okay.
And then Horowitz is his actual last name. But
Okay.
that's what Jaws was based off of. But it's pretty obvious that they were like, with the shark references and even the scene with the car coming out of the water and the fact that, he has teeth and they call him Jaws.
Well, and they're practically going Donna, Donna, Donna when the car
Yes.
comes out of the water. Cubby's like, quick, like, do we have any characters that have teeth? We need to
Well-
capitalize on this Jaws blockbuster thing.
I don't know.
And
I
they're
mean,
like,
it probably all came together like strangely or inorganically. I don't know. But, like Richard Kiel had been in tons of other movies and B films prior to this,
Yeah.
playing different characters, even in other
Yeah.
types of things. I think he was even in an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and stuff like that. So,
well, this is
which
kind of what we
another
talked
spy
about
thing.
last time. Like you can look to the past and you can be like, this is where these things came from. But if they work, they work. Like
Yeah.
naming Jaws, regardless of Spielberg, that was a great fix. Horowitz or the horror or whatever.
Well,
whatever.
it was,
Just
Horror
Jaws.
Horowitz.
That's great.
Yeah. But I mean, some of those characters in the books were more like mafia based, where, they put them in, translate them to movies, they're more like these international villains, right? I'm not finished, so I have more. So then let's talk about quickly Barbara Bach, who plays Major Anya Amasova? Is that how you say her name? That's not how you say her
Amasova?
name.
Amasova?
Amazov?
Yeah.
Anya Amasova. And I wish I
Ama
knew like
Amasova.
Russian names
Amasova?
are awesome. They always come in
Agent-
threes, right?
Yes,
Triple
Agent
X.
Triple X. I tried to see if it translated anything sexual in Russian, but I didn't come up with anything. But obviously,
Is there
Agent
a
Triple
Vin
X.
Diesel Triple X?
Before Vin Diesel ever did.
Before Vin Diesel or Ice Cube.
Now I had to
Yeah.
find something interesting to say about her other than her name. And the interesting thing is, ironically, while we have a Beatles member, Paul McCartney, has made music for the Bond films, Ringo Starr is married to this Bond girl. So
Yeah, he
there's another
ditched
Beatles
Maureen.
connection with
Really?
another neat Beatles connection with the Bond franchise.
Yep.
And that all goes back to Goldfinger.
My dear girl, there are some things that just aren't done, such as drinking Dom Perignon 53 above a temperature of 38 degrees Fahrenheit. That's as bad as listening to the Beatles without earmuffs.
Goldfinger to Live and Let Die to now
Yes,
Ringo Starr's Mrs.
Yes.
Ringo Starr.
is in this movie.
I love how over time people have made fun of that too. Like even Ringo Starr got a Bond girl.
Yeah.
If you're in the Beatles or can play an instrument, maybe you can get a Bond girl.
Even you could get Bond Girl. So, and then I have two more things very quickly, but I think the second one, I think, is who we should toast to this film, because you might think it's Richard Kiel for this film, but I would save him for another film that we will talk about very shortly after this. So first off, I wanted to say a few returning faces in this film, and there's going to be other people that are in this movie that may or may not show up in other movies, but we'll talk about that when we get there. You'll have an ongoing character, Walter Gotell, plays General Gogol. Gogol. Is that how you say him?
Gogol.
Gogol.
They say
Gogol. You guys may remember Gogol in another Bond film. This is his second outing, but he plays a different character. Back then, he played Morzini.
He's Mr. Minute 52 Seconds.
Exactly 1 minute 52 seconds. That's excellent.
He's the Spectre agent on Spectre Island.
Welcome to Spectre Island.
Welcome
from
to
Russia with
Spectre Island!
Yeah, that's the same guy, but he was younger back then, and you can tell he's definitely aged. The second guy, you guys may recognize, may not recognize. He's not like a big name. People aren't like hounding about, oh yeah, this guy was fantastic. But Shane Rimmer, if I say that right, or Reamer, who has his final appearance in the Bond franchise. He played a radar technician in You Only Live Twice, a lab assistant in Diamonds Are Forever, and in this film, he plays the U.S. Navy submarine captain. Same time this movie came out, same year, he had a brief scene in Star Wars.
This R2 unit of yours seems a bit beat up. You want a new one?
A more recent film you guys might remember him in is in Batman Begins.
Evacuate the building. We're right on top of the main hub, and it's gonna blow.
And you can kind of see how, like, Christopher Nolan's even a huge fan of these Bond films. He gets a guy that, like, just some dude who was kind of in the background of these movies.
Yeah.
Okay, and honestly, I can't remember if I cut it from previous episodes, but you said about him that his whole take on his early career was, he was like, whenever the Brits just need a generic American guy, they always hire me.
So he is a Canadian actor who was always in He played in a lot of British productions because Star Wars was filmed in Britain at Pinewood Studios, same studios where they're filming this movie, parts of this movie.
Sometimes like next door, like concurrently, right?
Yeah, I believe. So. I mean, I never looked into it too much, but it wouldn't be unbelievable to believe that this film and that film were filming at the same time, or
it's like when the Beatles are writing songs and next door Pink Floyd is doing their thing, you know?
Yeah,
and they like have lunch together.
So he's a Canadian actor, and he would self-proclaim himself as the Rent-A-Yank actor. So if you ever wanted an American actor in your British production who could do an American accent and not sound like an idiot, you would get this guy to be in your movies or TV shows. And then also, I just want to add that Rimmer had passed away recently. He passed at the age of 89 in 2019. So he has recently passed.
Yeah, sure.
Does anybody have any preliminary placing for this? Any propositions?
I have an idea, but I'm worried I won't be able to defend it if you guys oppose.
Shut the up and throw it out at us.
I'm thinking number 8, below Live and Let Die, above Diamonds and Forever.
Okay, that's definitely
I did not
lower
enjoy
than my
it that much.
Yeah.
And okay, here's the thing about this movie. Like right off the bat, it's generally held in high regard. It doesn't do it for me like obviously The Man with the Golden Gun does it for me. And this is what's so hard about this process is how to judge these, because this is a solid Bond movie. And
it's not horrible.
My general feeling is within the neighborhood of, it's kind of like last time. I kind of want to weigh it against Dr. No. I mean, I'd place it as high as 4, because it's because here's the thing. Like last time McCurdy and I argued endlessly about goofiness. But up until then, I was arguing about, like, when it was dished down to Goldfinger and From Russia with Love, I was like, well, Goldfinger's goofy. Like, From Russia with Love is classy and awesome. And, you know, for our reasons, we went with Goldfinger being at the top. But, like, this movie's solid, and yes, it has goofy stuff, but, like, Bond is goofy. It's a fantastical world, and it's not until recently that it's, you know, it wasn't until Batman Begins that suddenly it became this dark, stark, and depressing, serious ordeal. We're going to be living in the popcorn action movie world for a while. And so you're going to have shit like, it's no coincidence that last time we had a car that flies and this time we have a car that swims. Generally, The Man with the Golden Gun is held low and The Spy Who Loved Me is held high. and I kind of think it's somewhat overrated, but at the same time, it is pretty solid and it is fun and it's got that fantastical Bond stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. But like starting off though, you do have to point out right away that it is basically a remake of You Only Live Twice,
which we have at the bottom right now.
But that being said, I think this movie is much better for a lot of reasons than that film.
It fixes everything that was shitty about You Only Live Twice.
If I'm arguing, I would put this at like number 3 for me.
Yeah, I can see it that high. Honestly, I can see it that high.
Okay, so like, really, I mean, yeah, Charlie's correct in saying like this movie did really well. Like if we want to talk historically speaking, and I know Charlie's going to say, I don't care about historically speaking. We're talking about this podcast. I don't give a fuck
about any of that. But yeah, go on.
But historically speaking, The Man with the Golden Gun, when it came out, was not a hit. People did not like that movie because you shouldn't like that movie because it's not a good movie. But that being said, when this movie came out, it was a huge hit. The scene, and they always talk about the scene when Bond's skiing down the hill and he flies off into Oblivion, and people,
That's
like
there's
no music or anything, and then
perfect.
There's no slide whistle, you mean?
There's no fucking slide whistle.
I'm going to cut it in
There's
right
nothing.
now. Boom.
British parachute. And
British
Bond
parachute.
theme.
The crowd cheered like bananas. They went crazy. Like,
well, because they do it right. They have the Bond theme come in, and you're like,
it was perfect.
Yeah,
it was perfect.
Yeah, like,
and okay. So I want to say this though. This like I'm gonna go on a little bit of a diatribe. I think this movie, what makes this movie great, is it is the best of till this point. I mean, this is Bond number 10, right? This is the 10th Bond film. This is the best of Bond. This movie is to me because it like has all these different tropes and all these different things that are in all these other Bond movies, and it has some really good stuff that it does really well. So I'm going to list a couple of these things real quick. So from Russia with Love, you have a train fight sequence again, but this one's great because Jaws is just a formidable villain, and he's like, you know, he's a huge
his
dude.
hand is the size of Bond's head.
It's amazing, and he's crushing it. That's amazing. Also, you have the Russian involvement, right? Like you have. You know, it's very tied in with Russia, much like From Russia with Love is. And not to mention, I love how they even kind of go back to that film as far as the general's office looks very similar to Kleb's office. Looks very empty. Similar.
It's just an empty space with one
chair.
desk.
With one chair, kind of really creepily in the background. You also have some callbacks to Thunderball. There's a very brief underwater sequence with the Lotus, but that whole sequence is also really well. Like, that sequence is great. Perfect. It's even better than most of the action in Thunderball.
They went back and filmed it in Nassau, which is interesting.
Nassau.
And that obviously we'll talk about the car and that whole thing, but that car's, that submarine actually worked and everything. It was a working sub. It probably didn't actually transform from a car to a sub. They probably built a submarine essentially that looked like that. But that whole thing looks amazing. And then you have the Only Live Twice. Yes, there's the whole ship capture.
I'm glad they didn't show it right away. I'm glad it was secret and then revealed later.
Because that took up a lot of screen time in the last movie. So it's like a mystery where it went.
Yeah. And then, and because it's like, people would be like, is this the same I've seen this movie.
And we get more shutters.
I noticed that. I was like,
the return of shutters.
The return of the shutters.
Stronger shutters.
We never have anybody say...
Nobody says close the shutters. They just say something like seal the room or something like that. But damn it, I wish they said more shutters. But you have a sequence.
Okay, wait. Another fan edit. Boom.
Open shutters.
Close the shutters.
Close shutters.
Okay, go ahead. that sequence is it plays off very similarly to You Only Live Twice.
Stop that astronaut. Bring him to me. Stop that astronaut!
Bring those 2 prisoners here.
But I think it does it much better, and it's a better movie because we have submarines, we don't have spaceships. It's not about like, oh my God, you took the spaceship. It's more about, oh no, the submarines have nuclear missiles on them, and they're going to shoot nuclear missiles at the United States and Russia. And then we get to Our Majesty's Secret Service references. Of course, we have skiing in the beginning of this movie. There's callbacks to Tracy Bond and how like that you can actually emotionally see how that still affects Roger Moore, or even like the Roger Moore James Bond, but it still affects James Bond. And he's like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
Many lady friends, but married only once. Wife killed.
All right, you've made your point.
You're sensitive, Mr. Bond.
About certain things, yes.
He has to fake a profession, much like he does in Our Majesty's Secret Service, where instead of being heli, he has to fake, oh, I'm a marine biologist, and like he even has that great moment with Stromberg, and Stromberg's like, do you know what that fish is? And he's like, of course, it's a lionfish,
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that whole, did he get an invite from Stromberg to go there? I don't understand
he
how
requested
he got
an
there.
audience.
Yeah, they knew it's Stromberg because they see it on the microfilm.
Yeah.
And so Stromberg's she even says like he's a Western capitalist, and so they already know that they can get something out of this guy because they're like, oh well, hey, by the way, can we request an audience to see you guys? So I would imagine like that's kind of the link to it. It's not very strong in the movie, of course, but
I would think like a bad guy who's plotting to blow up the world wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I'll invite a marine biologist into my secret base thing. Like,
Well, okay, so
that was weird.
Imagine
to
you're
me.
Stromberg and a marine biologist reaches out to you, and it's a guy who is like, okay. I'm trying to talk about this without getting to Stromberg's motivations. We'll save that for later. But basically, Stromberg is clearly insane. Like that's why I made my Dolphumanoid joke. Like, why does this guy want to create Waterworld? He must just be insane. Whereas with Spectre, it's all about extortion. Stromberg says explicitly,
Waterworld.
I'm not interested in extortion. I just want to create Waterworld.
Yeah.
And so he's clearly insane, but a marine biologist would be like a butt buddy for him. You know? So it's like it makes sense that he would invite him. Now, what Bond didn't realize was that Jaws had survived getting his ass kicked out of a train, so Jaws ends up fingering them to Stromberg, and then that's when Stromberg's like, send everybody to kill them in one sequence. Which
was an awesome sequence.
Real quick, the man with the golden gun didn't have very good Bond jokes, so we didn't even talk about him.
No.
This Bond joke,
Fill this one with Bond.
I love it.
All those feathers and he still can't fly.
I love that.
That ragdoll can't fly?
What?
Yeah.
The
When he
ragdoll can't fly?
ragdolls off the cliff.
Yeah, the ragdoll. So he just dropped in for a quick bite. Whatever, who cares? Throwaway line. What's kind of funny though is that after Stromberg has been taken out, Triple X is like,
Stromberg?
Dead.
Bond just says, oh, he's dead. He doesn't say a joke. He's just like, he's dead. You know, he didn't say like, he sleeps with the fishes.
It doesn't fall under your category, Charlie, but I love this joke when at the very beginning.
Moneypenny, where's 007?
He's on a mission, sir, in Austria.
Well, tell him to pull out. Immediately.
Then just flashes to him and he's in a girl.
That's just like, there's a lot of sexual humor,
good
you know,
clips, yeah.
but like a Bond joke is typically he murders a dude and then he's making a joke about it, as opposed to Bond makes sexual jokes all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, like even with Naomi, who is probably the hottest Bond chick so far. She does it for me, but he's like,
What a handsome craft. Such lovely lines.
Bond's making those jokes all the time, but that's not a Bond joke.
Yeah.
In my definition, in my list, I don't care about those jokes are funny, but I don't care about them.
You know, the last movie had this big duel and all this shit. And
Dick
this
shot.
movie, it's like we have
It just shoots
essentially
him
like
through
a
the tube thing.
we
dick
essentially
shots.
have a dick shot, yeah, but we essentially have a
Two dick
Blofeld like esque villain who, by the way, it's like if you don't see it or if you blink, you'll miss it kind of thing is he has fucking fish fingers. He has fish hands.
I didn't realize it throughout the whole movie.
If you watch very closely, he has fish hands.
Really?
And apparently that's why he doesn't want to shake hands.
Mr. Stromberg prefers not to shake hands.
He's a Dolphumanoid?
He's the Dolphumanoid in this movie. If you watch very closely, he has fish hands when he's touching Agent X or Triple X.
That's great.
If you look closely. But I was going to say is when he's shooting, when Bond kills him, it reminded me when you guys were talking about it, Dr. No, how he kills that one guy. And he like pops him like 6 times or whatever. He shoots him.
Stromberg's death is great. Like the death performance is great.
He just pops him 4 times
on the face. Just
it reminded me of in the Godfather spoof when the guy gets shot in the head and he's still eating spaghetti.
Yeah.
And then he dies. Like he's like his face is in his food and he's like, like his death performance is great, but don't you wish it was a little more fitting? Even at one point, he says he's like,
there's beauty, there's ugliness, and there's death.
And he points at a shark. Wouldn't it be great if he was eaten by his own shark? Like, wouldn't that be a more fitting death? You know, I know that Atlantis is above the water at the end, but wouldn't it be fun if right when Bond got on, Atlantis went underwater to where the submarine, which is underwater, could be, looking at it or whatever. And then, that would have meant they would have had to build a miniature underwater, and maybe that was tough. But, like, wouldn't it have been more fitting had Bond caused the windows around his little dinner table to break and then allow the shark to come in and eat the guy? Like, wouldn't that have been a little more fun and totally fitting as opposed to just capping him while he sat there like the fat ass that he is?
Yeah.
Maybe they ran out of time?
The windows that are around him aren't they're the shark tank, though. They're just the exterior of the base.
Then let him drown.
Shark tanks
let the water come in and he drowns as Bond escapes, Just something more fitting than just like getting shot in the fucking face.
I do feel, though, I think the reason why they didn't go that route may have to do with just the actor's age, and they couldn't do as much physical stuff as they wanted to.
They couldn't get him a stunt guy. I mean, I get that. But get him a stunt guy.
And also on top of that, I think that in the original script, it was that Jaws was going to get eaten by the shark instead of Jaws surviving at the end of the film like he does, because he, based off screen tests, they were like, oh, we love this guy. Like, we want to bring him back. So...
Yeah,
that was how he was supposed to get killed, but then they didn't do that. But I don't disagree with you. I could see it could have been a much more fitting end. But
imagine the line Bond could have had. He could have had his death line where he's like, well, Stromberg, now you get your life under the sea or whatever the now you get to live under the water like you always wanted to. And then the water's rushing in and he's like, oh, I'm too fat. And he can't get out. And he drowns while Bond escapes. And then it makes sense that they get into the little escape pod thing because they're already underwater. It's like, how do we get off this place? And sure, maybe it was too expensive. Maybe it was just too much work or whatever. But that's the whole thing, right? Like, shouldn't he have a fitting death? I mean, we talked about this last time. Like, bad guys should have a fitting death. Remember, dude farting his way up to the ceiling as a balloon and exploding
like that.
Is terrible.
Yeah.
A fitting death is always fun and complete. And with this one, it's just like, how about we just shoot him in the fucking face?
Stromberg?
Dead.
The first 30 minutes or so were great. I'm trying to pinpoint when the turning point was for me. And off the top of my head, I want to say it was when Bond fought not Jaws, but the other henchmen. I thought that fight scene was really weak. I don't know if it was just lame fight choreography or what, but
it's like we talked about last time with just Roger Moore is a little older, so they're just the fight scenes aren't like badass Marvel, Daniel Craig. They're like
that makes sense.
And even when he's fighting Triple X's guys, Boris and Vlad or whatever, and it's old school fighting, and it's like watching Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader go at it in the original Star Wars. It's like it's like it has its charm, but it hasn't reached badass levels because that just didn't exist yet, because it just wasn't important. It was more about like being Like Bond was more suave than he was like now Daniel Craig. It's like now you have to have a 6-pack and be like fucking jacked, you know, like you got to be a UFC fighter now versus like just being able to just brawl or whatever.
That also goes along with, I think, what we'll run into in these films, and I think it'll make it harder to figure out where we want to place them, is because story aside, right, like things like the MPAA start coming up where you now have rating systems so you can get away with more stuff as far as what you're writing. Also, technology.
This movie has titties.
Technology gets better. We'll talk about titties in just a second, Charlie. Technology gets better. And so you get smaller cameras, you get cameras that can shoot in better low light situations. And so you can get these much more choreographed action scenes like John Woo and things later down the line. But at this point, you have these bigger cameras, especially if you want wider formats, like they're giant 70 millimeter cameras. It makes it hard to do all that stuff in,
and it's like stage
in a 12-hour day.
It's literally
too.
like the type of fighting you'd have on a stage.
But we've had other great fight scenes in previous Bond movies, even like really, like, you know, Dr. No from Rush
But those are also in stage
really
settings where you're not out on a location. That also makes a huge difference. When you're on location doing fighting, it's a different situation.
So like Nance, imagine you have like, what did we say from Rush with Love? They spent a week or something on that fight scene that they could do on this train set versus I think they shot on location at the pyramids, right? So it's like, we have a couple of hours. So like just cover it in a wide shot. Like fuck it. Just a couple of different angles. They don't have a week to shoot at the pyramids. They have a couple of hours for a day, maybe 2. I don't know how long they did it. And there's an importance level, right? Like that fight with Jaws, important. That fight with Red Grant, important. A fight with just a couple of dudes or like the not the muscle, but like the muscles muscle, you know? Sandor, right? Sandor.
That
was his
makes
name.
sense.
Whereas, like with Marvel today, every single fight is badass, right? Or like with Bond movies today, every single fight is badass because I mean, they probably just have more time and resources now. Nowadays, XXX would be like Black Widow. She would be just kicking ass, and you can do that.
Well, she's a secret agent, so
cameras
you would kind
and
of
editing.
expect it.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that now through editing, you can make Scarlett Johansson look like a fucking badass, right? That's how you do that.
Yeah.
She's not picking somebody up and spinning them around like Bane. You make her look badass by cut over here, and you make and through sound you make it look fucking badass. Whereas with these movies, they're like, again, I can only point to Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, where it's just like it's somewhat primitive, and they're like, yeah, whatever, like it worked for the time, but
anyway.
I
mean, and I'm not saying that fight scene killed the movie. I'm just saying in terms of where in the movie I started to get, I don't know, bored or something.
Well, let's rewind 2 minutes to where that scene just doesn't really make that much sense. So Bond has just got to Egypt. He meets with his contact, who then hooks him up with a babe, which is like a fun little scene where he's like, "Are you sure you didn't want to stay and bang my harem?" He shows up to Cairo and he goes to meet Fakesh, and Fakesh is gone, and there's like an assistant there, and you see Sandor is there waiting for Bond. You assume it's Fakesh's assistant, and why not? We've never seen this woman, so she probably is. She clearly knows about Sandor, and she's kind of purposely distracting Bond.
Yeah.
That scene is vague, so you can. It's kind of like whatever. Like I'm willing to be like whatever. But at the same time, when you scrutinize that scene, it really just doesn't make any sense. Like, is this chick a Stromberg person? Is she there with Sandor? Did Sandor say like, "Bitch, there's a guy coming, and like you're gonna distract him with your pussy, and then you know you're gonna bang him, and while you're banging him, I'm gonna shoot him in the face." But like the scene also kind of comes across the same way as the death of Fiona, remember?
Yeah.
Like the gun
I
behind the
got
curtain.
same vibe.
He doesn't even have a rifle. He has a pistol from like a mile away, and he's gonna just shoot in the general direction of Bond and this woman, and like he could have easily shot the woman. Oh wait, he did. In the same way that Bond whipped Fiona. A discussion that we've kind of pussyfooted around but haven't exactly had yet, which is like the mechanics of Bond's seduction. We've talked about how it's feasible that Bond can seduce a woman in 5 seconds. It can be more fun when a woman makes him work for it. So like you have the difference between like Pussy Galore, who made him work for it, Fiona, who made him work for it but didn't flip. Well, Fiona did not make him work for it, but then, didn't flip like Pussy Galore did. Miss Anders didn't flip immediately to Bond. But like with this chick, she falls in love with him in like 30 seconds after one kiss to where she's willing to sacrifice her life. No! Yeah, it's an odd scene. Yeah. Like that whole scene is very odd. Now, does it break the movie? Not necessarily, but like under scrutiny. That scene is saved by one thing. The fight with Sandor is saved by one thing, and that's where Bond's like,
Where's Peckish? Where's Peckish? Pyramids!
I love that shit. Like, he just murders the guy with no regard. I love it. That's Bond as hell. But everything up until that moment is just kind of...
I would say that scene is the weakest, maybe one of the weaker parts of the film, and I agree with you, Nanza. It might be where, I was tired today watching the film, and I was probably like, that was the moment where I was like, I'm going to go take a little nappy nap before I finish the rest of this movie. That's probably around that moment when I got tired. But I will say that is also one of the least memorable moments of this movie, and I think when you look at the movie as a whole, this movie has more memorable moments, which I wanted to actually get to real quick.
I have plenty more praises to sing about this movie. I'm putting it down at the bottom, but I was initially thinking higher, and I could definitely be swayed higher.
I just think this is a much better movie when you look at everything that this movie has to offer. It's like, there's a lot more going on in this movie.
Like you throw out like, well, here's stuff like, skiing scene and train scene and all that. And that's like, that's cool, but that's like just having a laundry list of like fun isn't enough to just like, oh, the story's great. It's like I've always said, like the story's going to be king for me. And because it's easy to just like write in all this crap, right? Like, hey, writer, make sure there's skiing in this movie and underwater stuff and babes.
The great thing about this movie is that even though, it's a travel movie, right? We go to Egypt, we see mountains. There's so many locations in this movie. There's a laundry list of really cool exotic places that most people don't ever get to see in their lifetime in this movie. Yep. That's sprinkles, that's candy, that's like most movies, right? That's part of the spectacle of this movie. This movie is very spectacle heavy, much like Goldfinger was in many ways. But the thing this movie has that some of the other movies don't have is a somewhat, even if it's not played up as much as some other movies, like one of my favorites, it has a story. And that story is, it asks the question of like, wait, so Bond kills all these henchmen and all these guys, and nobody else is like, that guy, I'm gonna get him. You know what I mean? So Bond kills all these henchmen and all these guys, and nobody else is like, that guy, I'm gonna get him. You know what I mean?
The death of 007.
And then it just so happens that he meets his equal in Russia, and they kind of fall in love, because the movie is called The Spy Who Loved Me. They don't fall in love like the more romantic way, but essentially, they're going together, they're sleeping together, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, she's like...
Bond love.
It's Bond love. But at the end of the day, she's like, yeah, my lover who, I was all about in the beginning of the movie, who's like, I'm going off to Austria to go on a mission. And she's like, did you kill him?
The answer to the question is yes. I did kill him.
Then, when this mission is over, I will kill you.
I kill a lot of people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at least it asks that little bit of a question, that little bit of a story right there that I'm like, that's the one thing that levels this movie just a little bit higher for me than, say, a lot of the other movies, that even the Connery movies. But then when you add that to the spectacle of all the locations, as well as many of the action scenes, that's kind of what does it for me for this movie. And yeah, you can make the argument that like Stromberg isn't necessarily the strongest villain that we've had, but he's much better than some of the other ones we've had in the past, such as like Largo.
I think him being a weak bad guy is what brings it down for me. I don't love the button pushing bad guy, which this guy kind of falls into. And then he even during the climax of the movie just leaves. He leaves the the big boat. I forget what it's called.
The Laparis.
Like every time I see this movie, he's stand-in Blofeld. He's not as good as Blofeld. He doesn't have the mysteriousness of especially the early Blofeld, but he's like, this is stand-in Blofeld. This is like, oh, well, we can't use Blofeld. Well, we'll create this new character named Stromberg. And instead of a squid, it's a fish symbol. And like, he's got fish hands, so he's deformed. And like, and he's also at least intelligent in the sense that like it plays off the audience, especially his intro scene where so if you guys remember the beginning of the movie, it's Bond's trying to find out where this heat-seeking device is, or trying to trace the heat-seeking device.
Yeah.
And the first scene is like he's talking to the guys who created the device that he hired to build the device that he was going to pay all this money to.
Those guys are awesome.
And there's, these two guys come into his office and we first meet him and we don't know where we're at. We think we're in some kind of like castle or something, like someplace in France, right? And, he has this hot broad sitting on the other end of the table, eating food with them silently. And it's a very, very Blofeld scene.
Someone has been attempting to sell the plans of our tracking project.
And then you're like, oh, it was her all along. But so it's you think he's going to kill one of those guys, and it turns out it's the chick. But then on top of that, he's like, all right, let's wait till they get on the helicopter so we can say it's an accident.
Yeah, we made it. We made it. They're shaking hands. We're like, yeah.
One of the parts I love the most about that makes that so villainous is the orchestral music in the background, too.
Yeah.
Like classical violin music. It makes him seem more evil and calm and,
Well, here's the thing, Scott. Here's the thing. We talked last time about diegetic versus non-diegetic. And this movie just so happens to play around with that idea
yes, I was several say
times.
This.
So with the death of his assistant, who, he's like, you betrayed me. And I don't really mind a bad guy being a button pusher because it is kind of fun. Like, it's like from his seat, he's able to just delve out so much destruction, and it can be a lot of fun. So, like, she gets in the elevator, she falls down the slide. There's a subtle cap to that scene later. Maybe you guys noticed it, maybe you didn't, but when Bond is there later and he's just waiting for Stromberg and he's like kind of looking around at all the fish, he catches sight of her hand at the bottom of the tank.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, huh, that's weird. It's like Bond's like, this is a villain, like there's a lady's hand. But anyway, so when that classical music comes on, can only the audience hear it? Or does Stromberg, did he hit play and he likes to listen to classical music as he's doing his thing of delving? Totally. It's like, you can totally believe that music is heard from everybody.
The pyramid scene reminded me of when you were talking about Goldfinger and you were like, Oddjob has this thing when they mentioned Oddjob. But in this movie, you kind of get that, but at the same time, you're not 100% sure if that is the music from the pyramid show or if it is...
Oh, the John Wick scene.
When you have like the cool light and all that stuff, like that looks really cool for the 1970s. And then you have the fact that like you have this like big music.
It's two things, right? It allowed the score over the top of this chase scene, death scene, and fight scene to be over the top. And that's kind of what makes it fun. And then on top of that, you have this narrator of the Pyramids show, and everything he's saying is like directly referencing what you're seeing on screen.
A servant of the king awaits the call to set out upon his journey into eternity. Death lies waiting.
This man's tomb, or a servant of the king, a.k.a. Bond. I mean, I know Queen, but like a servant of the king, defending against death. Like everything that this guy is saying, it's a clever scene because everything the narrator's saying is referring to Bond's actions and everybody else's actions. But then also, it's like as he's fighting these guys, you have this triumphant music that would never work on its own. Cut to the scene with Sandor with that music, and you'd be like, what the fuck is this? But because it's excused by the Pyramids show, it can be in there to the point where then Bond turns to Triple X and he's like, Hope you enjoyed the show. Like it's that whole scene is really clever.
It looks cool too. The lighting is awesome.
It's like the one mise-en-scène moment in this film, much like how Live and Let Die had the funeral procession.
Good night.
And how that all plays out really well, and there's a setup and payoff to that. I think this, even though there's not like a setup and payoff essentially, but I think this scene has that mise-en-scène, that like extra element of taking something and reframing it in a really cool way.
Yeah.
And that's like a highlight moment for me in this movie.
I didn't notice during the movie, and this doesn't ruin that scene at all, but so like with the lighting, it goes dark and then Jaws disappears, right? How the heck does that work? Because we see in a previous scene, he is slow. He is a big lumbering dude. He can't just
whatever.
Like,
he's Michael Myers.
Disappearing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like that scene plays off like a horror movie, essentially. Yeah, like it's a horror death. It's a horror scene. You know, it's not necessarily a heroic chase fight scene like you would see in a movie of that time. But it's more about like Jaws is this menacing, hulking character, and he goes after the guy who has the plans or the microfilm or whatever, and he kills the dude.
This is the tomb of Kiel.
He's definitely menacing and scary, but I find him to be a little silly. Like, he's super strong. Why does he bother biting people? He could just snap their neck.
It's fetish. Gets off on it.
The one moment where it makes sense is where he bites off the chain on the bars. The one moment where it doesn't really make sense is when Bond throws a piece of wood at him on the train fight, and then he just takes the piece of wood and like bites it.
He's just like,
he doesn't use it to stab him or anything. He just bites the wood.
I'm fine with that so far as it's intimidating.
Yeah.
There's a certain level of intimidation that Jaws projects. My whole thing isn't that him biting people, I think, is great. I think his goofiness comes in the form of my one goof for the movie. And the movie has some goofy stuff, you know, like the car falling into the house.
Yeah.
You know, like there's some goofy stuff, but I don't care. I mean, like McCurdy, you were arguing that The Man with Golden Gun has a lot of goofy stuff. And I'm like, whatever. Like, because now we live in popcorn zone. We live in Popcornville with the movies.
Scott made a good point. But Scott did make a good point, though, that this movie feels a lot more balanced as far as the goofy and the serious. It's a much more balanced movie.
Sure. But there's still goofy in there. There's still fantastical stuff. And like for you, what it comes down to is like the car plane doesn't work. This car boat works. Like car sub works. Like that's fine. Like we'll just like.
So what's your one goof?
We disagree on like the car plane for different reasons, but like there's still Roger Moore goofiness throughout this movie, and I'm fine with that for the same reasons I'm fine with it in The Man with the Golden Gun. But the worst fucking sequence in this whole movie is the moment that Bond gets into the phone booth repair car truck with Jaws, and then XXX gets in too. They're at the club. They meet up with Kalba, the owner of the club. Kalba gets up to go to the phone. Turns out that it was a ruse by Jaws so he could get the microfilm. He kills Kalba. He runs out into his, where he's sitting in his car like this. And Bond follows him and he gets in. And then XXX follows Bond and she gets in. And,
they're not whispering.
And then at the same time, for some reason, there's a speaker that goes from the back up to the front so that Jaws can listen into their conversation, which they're not even whispering. They're like, "Hey, we're in a car," and Jaws, "Hey, we know about Jaws, right? Do you know about Jaws? Yeah, we know about Jaws." And so then Jaws drives them out into the middle of nowhere, and Jaws' whole plan is not to just go in the back and just fucking murder them, which he could easily do, even though they have guns. Like, they never use a gun on Jaws. He could just go in the back and just fucking kill them. But instead, Jaws drives out into the middle of nowhere and then runs them around some Egyptian ruins and then tries to drop a rock on Bond's head and then attacks Bond. And then right away is bested by XXX with a gun. Whatever. Then past that, she gets the microfilm from Jaws. She runs back to the car. Bond has the keys, which is cool. I mean, that like Bond is smart. He grabs the keys before they go chase Jaws. But then we have our first comical scene that completely undermines the fucking terror that is Jaws, where Jaws comes out of nowhere, lands on the hood. He rips off the roof. He then doesn't grab them. They don't even have guns. Like, wouldn't it have been great if once he ripped off the roof, she immediately shot him in the chest, like just in the shoulder, and he's like, and he falls off.
That would make
But then he gets back up because he's Michael Myers. He's a badass motherfucker, and he starts ripping up the car. But instead, it just completely undermines Jaws. It just makes him look like a fucking clown. He was terrifying up until then, but then suddenly it's like he doesn't have a dick. It was almost as if he wanted them to steal the microfilm. If that was the case, like, let them get away with the Death Star plans so we can track them. Great, but no, it just completely undermined Jaws.
Yeah.
Like, and here's my fix. I would so much rather have Bond go look for Calba, who's been murdered in the phone booth, and then boom, we just have a fight scene within the club between Bond and Jaws, and then Triple X joins in on the fight because at that point in the movie, she's like, I guess Bond is an ally as much as we're competitors. I'll help him get the microfilm so that then, later she can blow smoke in Bond's face and steal it from him. But like, would it not have worked better to have Calba get killed? They have a fight within the club, just like they do on the train. I mean, you could still have the train scene, but like they battle it out in the club and they defeat Jaws together and run off, rather than this ridiculous scene that ends in Jaws tearing apart the truck for no reason. Like, he's just showing off, and then they drive out and they have the ridiculous music, and then they have to walk. Like, that whole sequence fucking sucks.
Yeah, I hated it. I mean, what you said makes sense. All those suggestions make sense, but I guess I didn't take it that far. I was just looking at the scene itself and thinking, there's no tension here. There should be, because we're supposed to think Jaws is like super scary, threatening guy.
Yeah.
Their music choice, and then I guess Bond is so confident he's just deciding to be a smartass in the scene and not scared of Jaws.
Would you like me to drive? Women drivers.
Bond's sitting there cracking jokes, and then cut to him on the train as he's like, holy f***. Like, that could just as easily have happened. Like, Jaws only had to reach in and grab both of them by the throat and pick them both up. Like, Argh. I mean, again, had she, I almost wish he hadn't kicked her gun away, or that she had picked it up, because as soon as he rips off the roof, he just jumps off the car. Like, had she shot him, that would have been cool. Like, like literally just shoot him in the fucking chest. And he's like, but it's like he's such a badass that hardly phases him. But instead, we have this stupid scene that just sticks out. It sticks out from the rest of the movie, and it should have just been fucking cut out like cancer.
So just so you're aware, the music choice specifically after this scene when they have to go back because they fucked the van up so badly is from Lawrence of Arabia. So that whole bit where he's walking and you hear the swell of music, that is the same theme. That is the exact same theme from Lawrence of Arabia. So they wanted to play off that scene. I mean, it wasn't as much as what I thought it was as like some of these other movies is playing off things that were popular at the time, because Lawrence of Arabia came out maybe 10 years before this movie came out.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just a fun callback to being like, oh yeah, remember that movie Lawrence of Arabia? Like this, like, because Indiana Jones isn't a thing at this time. So like that's the reference.
It just goes to show though that whole sequence is a joke. And like I've said, Bond doesn't always need to be serious, but like, wouldn't you prefer Jaws to maintain his credibility as a bad guy rather than at that point it's like I'm sorry, but in the next movie Jaws is completely undermined. But like, wouldn't it have been better had he been a terrifying tour de force the whole film rather than this moment where you're like, this guy shouldn't be taken seriously? I mean, without that scene, he would have maintained some credibility. Which, okay, speaking of music though.
But hold on. I will also say I'm reviewing the playback here, and then you do have some moments where like they run into Jaws, and they're like, okay, we pinned this guy down, but then he like lifts the car up, and then they're able to like get past
I know,
it. And then
but
if you want to talk about undermining moments, though, the worst part is when he like lifts the stone and it hits his foot. So,
well, that's what I mean. That's that whole sequence is
again,
just a big joke against Jaws.
If to go to Charlie's team and give you a point on this one, I would say that I think this is the epitome of when you write a movie around set pieces, because obviously it's very clear to me that they were like, well, we got to film in Egypt because Egypt's a really cool exotic location.
Exactly.
And then they would be like, okay, well, let's have a fight scene besides this pyramid scene that's in the dark with this light. That might not work with the audience. So
how about he drives out into some Egyptian ruins and we walk around like a tour,
and it's light and people actually can see all this stuff. And so they would put this scene in the movie and they were like, yeah, it's still great, even if it's goofy. And yeah, it's not as. But the thing is, like, this movie is like evenly goofy, where I'm like, nothing to me sticks out ridiculous enough there.
That whole sequence, though, like that
there's
whole
no slide whistle
sequence,
in this fucking movie, is what I'm saying.
Most of the goofiness is in that sequence, and then beyond that, it's like fun goofy, like Jaws flying off the highway and landing in that Italian guy's house.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun. Like I'm not gonna. That is goofy, but that's fun goofy. You know the whole thing of the muscle comes back pretending to be a waiter later on.
Yeah.
Jaws could never do that. Like it's like 17 feet tall.
When it comes to all the Bond villains we've seen, and and as much as I don't like the man with the golden gun, I still agree that Christopher Lee's character in that movie is a much more active playing villain per se. And this guy, he's not as active. He doesn't, he's not the guy chasing down Bond like some of these other villains we had. I mean, we had Goldfinger, who was actually involved with all of the things. That's why, to me, it's not as good as Goldfinger. And it's not as good as From Russia.
I'll disagree on one point to where I actually like him. He's he doesn't have a childish drive to it. He has an image in his mind that he wants to create in the world, and Bond's like, "What do you want? Name your number. What do you want? Stop." And he's like, "Do you think I'm into such frivolous things?" He's like, "I want to destroy the world. I want to create
which is fair. Like I think it's really cool that he has this really odd motivation.
He's just driven.
That goes beyond money.
That's what I like.
It goes beyond. It's like he's
he's a megalomaniac. He's a megalomaniac
he's a
villain.
Proper villain.
An underwater city.
Fascinating, isn't it? The only hope for the future of mankind.
We all have our dreams.
No dream, Mr. Sterling. Soon a reality.
Now, the weird thing, though, is like I understand his motivation. I want Waterworld. I want everybody living underwater. I love the sea. Cool. But, like, how do you then convince all of these henchmen to live in the water world? Like it's like, hey, henchman, I'm new here.
Free real estate.
How much are you getting paid? And they're like, oh, I'm not getting paid. I'm gonna have a dolphin wife later.
Yeah.
But like that captain. What is the captain's motivation? Like, does the captain want to live in Waterworld?
That tracks for me if you've seen movies like Superman 2, where, like, there's even a whole thing where Lex Luthor's, like, pleading with General Zod. He's like, listen, I'll let you take over the world. Just give me Australia. You know what I'm saying? And to me, it's like that tracks with this kind of motivation where it's like you have this megalomaniac who's like, I've got this devious evil plan. I have all these resources at my fingertips. If you come work for me, I will give you a place in my kingdom, essentially. Much like this demonic version
but who wants to live in Waterworld? Like, those henchmen, why do the henchmen want to live in Waterworld?
Because they are all marine biologists.
There's got to be enough people that would love to live in the ocean.
Why not? What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
You can't pay those guys enough dollars because dollars are obviously going to be useless. So it's like you're going to have a place in the new world. But, like, those henchmen are also like super freaks about the sea, like, and they've all been turned into SeaWorld people. Like, it's a little
twice.
odd.
Do we know what the henchmen's motivations are?
Money.
There?
In a matter of hours, when America and Russia have annihilated each other, we shall see a new power dominating the world.
My government is quite satisfied.
Good.
The U.S. and Russia are going to destroy each other, and China's going to take over. And we're going to be in league with China. We're going to be rich. It's not like it's not like the entire surface area of the planet is going to be irradiated through nuclear winter and all that.
A new and beautiful world beneath the sea. Today, civilization as we know it is corrupt and decadent. Inevitably, it will destroy itself. I'm merely accelerating the process.
And everybody's going to live under the sea. Like, if I'm one of those henchmen, it's like, okay, what's better? To live in the world as it is now or to live under the sea? It's like, well, the world as it is now. If you had to choose, if it's like, okay, the world's going to end, it's like, okay, I'd rather be a part of the new world order under the sea. But like, that wouldn't necessarily motivate me to work for this psychopath. If anything, I would kind of be more motivated to betray him and just shoot him in the fucking face like Bond does. Like, it's like, what do these hundreds of guys working for Stromberg have to gain unless they all want to have dolphin wives?
I will argue, though, that the problem with your argument is now you're arguing like every Bond film's henchman, right? Like, this is a question that I think people...
it's totally believable. Being a henchman, you get
sit
paid.
Up at night, though. Think about
paid.
this. Think about this. Like, everybody who's any movie that has bunches of henchmen and stuff, like, that starts to delve on you and you're thinking like, okay, so
dude, they're getting
why
paid.
Would you work for these people? Yeah, but
they're getting paid.
Where are you going to use this money if you're already like listed as a criminal essentially as under this one of these henchmen? Like, it just doesn't
like working
add
for
up.
the mafia. Like, you can still get rich and then like disappear, like you said, like disappear to Australia or whatever. But like, oh wait, Australia has been destroyed by this nuclear winter and everybody lives under the sea now. Like, all these guys have to be down to live in SeaWorld, to live in Waterworld. And like, okay, I mean, I guess that it's a cult and they all want dolphin wives. I mean, that's why I keep making that joke, because it's like, what other motivation do these guys have? Like, hey, we all got paid $100,000 a piece to pull off this job. Oh, wait, money is worthless now. Like, can you pay us in clamshells? Because clamshells are the new dollar. You know, like, it's like, under scrutiny, it's just a weird motivation. Now, like, Stromberg just being insane, that's great. Maybe it would have worked if everybody in the control room thought, oh no, this is just extortion, and then Stromberg is secretly plotting to destroy the world. Like, that would kind of make sense. But like, as it stands, none of the, especially that captain guy who's like so willing to follow Stromberg's orders, it's like, is that guy looking forward to fucking dolphins? Like, and it's all guys too. It's all men. It's like,
but I will say, like
dolphin wives for everybody. Yes, Dolphumanoids are the future. Why would anybody follow this guy?
I get, because we don't see the women. Like, but I mean, he does have some gorgeous babes hanging out, but we don't see a lot of them. So maybe there are more that we just don't see.
Like, hey, henchman, you get Naomi. I'd be like, oh, I'll fucking blow up any country you need for Naomi.
Oh my God, that's what I should have said.
It.
I'm like, dude, if he has Naomi and the secretary, like, he probably has like a plethora of these gorgeous women.
But he fucking killed the secretary. He should have just kept her in prison.
He has a bunch more, man.
Yeah, but he should have locked her up. Like, you will be the first one to fuck the male dolphins.
She's probably all dolphins. Like,
secretary, babe, the dolphins are gonna rape you, and your offspring will be the first of the Dolphumanoids.
Oh my God.
After you get gangbanged by 17 dolphins, you bitch. Instead, he had her just get eaten by a shark.
Yeah.
Keeping the prisoners, right? We talked about how keeping the astronauts is weird because it's like, why keep them? Why not ransom them? Why not just kill them? Like, they're a liability. Is Blofeld a softie because he's keeping the astronaut prisoners? With this, it's not just a couple of astronauts.
It's like an army.
It's like an army. So it's like it'd be one thing. Like, okay, I'm breaking my own rule, but it's just like referencing how they do this in the future. Fake drink. In Tomorrow Never Dies, they just fucking kill all the guys that were on the sub, and it's great. Yeah. And like, maybe that's one of those things where it's like, it was the 90s, 2000s, that era.
It may not have been something you could get away with in the 70s.
Yeah, like
you
gunning
might
all
have
these
been able
guys down. Yeah, and okay, imagine this though. Imagine the crew refuses to come out of the sub, and they take the cyanide gas.
You have precisely 2 minutes to open your hatches and surrender your ship. The alternative is extermination.
imagine the amount of time you'd have to spend getting those bodies out of there. Like, that's
Yeah.
a pain in the ass. And even just like, what are you going to do? Like, have them all just lemming off? Like, are you going to put them in like gas ovens? How are you going to exterminate all these guys? Whereas like, you just keep them locked away, and then maybe he wanted to keep them for his like Dolphumanoid army in the future or whatever. Like, I don't know. But it's like, what do you guys think about them keeping the prisoners this time?
I think
Stupid.
I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, Charlie, with the idea that his plan is not to his plan is his weird view is like to create a new world, right? And so like, if you want to populate this new world, like, why am I killing off all these guys?
They need women.
They do need women.
They need women.
That's why they're gonna the dolphins, which we've already decided.
Yeah.
But
totally.
Don't need women.
But that being said,
Dolphumanoids!
that being said, it's like,
who wouldn't f a dolphin?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of that, but I think it's also like, and if I'm gonna step outside the movie, it's gonna be like, these movies were made for kids as well at the time, so they're like, we're not gonna have a scene where a bunch of dudes are just like in the water, like, I know exactly what scene you're talking about, and I'm like, that would make way more sense.
Yeah, put yourself in the shoes of those guys. The world's been destroyed, and it's like, we can either kill you or you can join the New World Order. I can believe that. Whereas with the astronauts, it was like, they were just a liability. And then, like, I mean, you could argue the same thing. Like, okay, now China runs things, but at the same time, it's less existential. It's less like China running things is less of a New World Order than fish people. It's like, do you want to be a fish person or not? Do you want to join the Dolphumanoids or die? And it's like, oh, fine, I'll f a dolphin. I'll do it.
If there's not a dolphin in this thumbnail, I'll be disappointed.
I don't think, is there even a dolphin in this whole movie?
No.
I don't think so.
No, there's not.
Okay. Switching gears, and if nobody has anything else to say about Dolphumanoids.
I was actually going to agree with McCurdy on a lot of the points. I thought this was a bit of a patchwork quilt of Bond to what we've seen at this point. It seemed like it was a bit of every movie, but every little bit of every movie they picked from, they did better. I actually think to this point, this is one of the better balanced Bond films we've seen. From start to finish, from plot to writing to the actual, like the background, like a proper Bond plot, like stealing nuclear submarines, nuclear end of the world, trying to destroy countries for not money or gain, etc., but like a proper maniac trying to destroy the world. Like a proper evil that you can't reason with. Frankly, some of the best looking Bond girls, I think, across the board. Even the receptionist. Even the receptionist is hot. Even the receptionist is hot. I disagree on Stromberg. I actually liked him. I agree that we've preferred active Bond villains in the past.
Yeah.
But I think he plays that button pusher very well. And
I don't disagree. See, that's the thing, Scott. I don't disagree. Like on principle.
Let me fucking finish my point before
I think sitting and pushing buttons. I don't think it's inactive to sit and push buttons.
No,
I think that's
not
still
necessarily.
active.
But we've preferred a more active Bond in the past, like actually getting in the water, fighting, etc. Skiing. We had this argument on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed him. I enjoyed his quirks. I think he was properly evil. He seemed like a maniac. Like his lines were well acted, well placed, well written. So I actually came into this wondering if we could actually argue for number one. I actually wondered if this could be better than Goldfinger. In certain different ways as a more balanced film, because we leave Goldfinger at the top in some kind of fucking pedestal and we never touch it. But while I was watching this movie,
Scott sounds like me now.
I felt like I was having a better time. Like everything seemed to flow better.
Work better.
Yeah, it just worked better.
Let me help you, Scott, on your point, because I wanted to make this point about this movie, and I think this is one of the strongest parts of the movie for me, at least. This movie takes the Aston Martin DB5 and says, "F that car. That car's bullshit. Let me give you the Lotus Esprit."
Yeah.
Lotus.
And it was brilliant.
And that whole scene, so like when I'm watching that scene, I'm like, wait a minute, holy shit. This is the best car chase that we've seen in any of these movies as far as like a super spy car chase, right? Like there's no slide whistles.
No.
He goes up against multiple vehicles. He goes up against a motorcycle that shoots a torpedo.
Escalating level of vehicles.
Yes. And he goes up to he goes up against Jaws in a car shooting a pistol. He goes up against a helicopter.
You ever got the feeling somebody doesn't like you?
And then he goes underwater and he fights some dudes underwater. And then he comes out of the water where we see a dude give a double take, which we'll see that guy in maybe some other movies. But that whole sequence to me, like as I was watching, I'm like, oh my God, this is like that game Spy Hunter. And then I realized I went to look at the arcade art for Spy Hunter because I'm like, wait a minute, let me look this up. The arcade game Spy Hunter, if you've never played it, you're basically a car that shoots other cars and you're driving along. And what I found out was like that game was intended to be a James Bond game. That game comes out much later than this movie, but the art of that car on the original Spy Hunter arcade cabinet is the fucking Lotus. And I was like, holy shit, like this is the inspiration for that fucking game. Because it's like one of the best, and it's in like the daylight, we can see all the action. The first time we see the DB5 in any like action scene, essentially using all its gadgets, it's dark out, it's hard to see. We have the bit with the ejector seat, but like it's not a great chase scene. This scene just says F that. Like this is a much better chase scene. And it's like for me, it's at least one of the better parts of the movie, for sure.
And there's that, the ski scene's better. I think this is one of the best.
Better car charging.
Better car
chase.
Shut the fuck up.
Better shutters.
Tits.
Bigger tits.
Dolphumanoids. We kind of have a repeat of last episode, but now it's Nans versus Scott. So far as Nans is like, F this movie, and Scott wants to put it at number one.
I didn't necessarily say I want to put it at number one.
You said you want to consider putting it number one. Own it.
I started thinking, could we argue it?
That's what you fucking said. So own it. So now you want to put it high, and Nans wants to put it low. Let's talk it out.
I started thinking, could we put it at number one? And I wanted to discuss it, you bitch.
I'll take a step back.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
I think maybe I'm putting too much weight purely on Stromberg and how I don't like how he's just a button pusher. But Charlie, you mentioned something that I suppose I didn't see at the time of watching the movie, and like it's kind of affecting my judgment on him. You mentioned he's a madman. He's just a crazy person that wants Waterworld, which that kind of changes things for me because I just saw him as a dumb guy with a stupid motivation. I thought he was just like some guy that wants Waterworld, and he's not really considering the reasons or the henchmen, like you said, like why would they want Waterworld? And I will say, I initially was thinking like maybe I couldn't see it being higher than On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And then I was comparing it to Thunderball for pretty obvious reasons. And I thought, well, I think Stromberg's a bit lazier than, I forget the bad guy's name in Thunderball, but
Largo.
Then I was thinking about Live and Let Die, and I was like, well, that whole plot like is a lot more realistic to me. And I guess I find myself just preferring bad guy plots that are more realistic with more active bad guys in terms of their involvement in the execution of the plot, where Stromberg is just a button pusher and he disappears when things start getting hot. Scott, you just mentioned he's not even here. Scott mentions how he really likes the whole like massive battle within the ship. And I don't like those. Just like in You Only Live Twice, it's just like lots of people, and like James Bond sort of gets lost in the sea of what's going on.
No ninjas this time either. Like,
yeah, instead of ninjas throwing shuriken, we get everyone's got grenades apparently on this boat.
I think what that scene does better though is it's got better shutters.
It's definitely better.
The shutters are vertical. They're not horizontal anymore.
What that scene does better is that it lets Bond stick out a little bit more, where I think the last one, it's like, oh, we got to go around to the back to get in. And this movie, it's like, we have a obstacle that we have to get past.
In brief, it's here's everything that sucked about You Only Live Twice finale fixed. Like, this is clear.
Yeah.
Like, they even brought back Lewis Gilbert, the director of You Only Live Twice, to essentially remake his movie. It's like they corrected everything that we complained about. Like, oh, Bond just hits the self-destruct button and just... It's clever that instead of just having a self-destruct button on the submarines, they have these two submarines destroy each other. Not only do we get one, everything's blowing up when we have to get away, but we get two, everything's blowing up when we have to get away sequences. So bottom line for me is this. When you guys lay out, oh, it has all this stuff. It's the same. It sounds to me, it's the same frustrating argument from Goldfinger, which is like, oh, but it's got all this stuff. It has an Aston Martin and it has these gadgets. And I just go, yeah, what's the difference between every movie just having that stuff? Like, okay, here, right now, Bond 26 is going to be, it's going to start with a ski scene. And then after the ski scene, there's going to be a chase. And then after the chase, there's going to be an underwater sequence. And then after that, Bond's going to bang a really hot chick. And it's like, that sounds good. How's the story? And it's like, well, there is no story. It's just that. These things become interchangeable. And they're weakened if they don't have something to anchor it. So I'm going to throw out my ranking. My ranking for this movie would be, and again, I'm like torn on this one. I have a neighborhood, but I keep putting it at number 4 because the bad guy, I like Stromberg, but I just have such a Scaramanga boner go watch that episode. I clearly really like The Man with the Golden Gun for its story elements, and I'm willing to forgive its shortcomings. This movie has a few goofs. And like McCurdy, it's like, I don't know how a flying car doesn't work for you, but like an underwater car suddenly works. Every Bond movie has goofy stuff. Like, we do live in this fantastical world, whether you like it or not. And like stupid shit, like Bond throws a fish out the window after they come out the water. Like, that doesn't even make sense, but it's funny, so they do it anyway.
That's funny
so it's
and
like,
silly.
Exactly.
I
It's like,
think the
whatever.
biggest difference between the flying car in that movie, that last movie, and then this movie is like, I think it has a much better setup with that car. Like, it really shows that car off and doing a lot of things. Like, we don't get an exposition scene with Q saying, like, this is the car and it can do all these things and it has some landmines and can turn into a submarine. Like, we don't get that scene. What we get is show, don't tell, him going against 3 different vehicles and then going underwater and then coming back out of water. And it's a really great sequence.
How did you know about that?
I stole the blueprints of this car 2 years ago.
They really play that car up really, really well. And to me, it's like the flying car thing was just like, it feels like a visual gag because it's like, well, how do we get Scaramanga and Mini-Me out of there, right? Oh, well, then the car, it's got wings on it, and then it flies away because we found this cool car that has wings on it and can fly away that just looks like the ugliest car we could find.
I agree with you so far as like it's a better reveal that Bond just drives right in. Like Bond doesn't have to stop off in a hangar and switch everything to sub mode. He just fucking drives off the pier and it's like boom, like that's cool.
It's also not again, like I've said, the last film was more of a visual gag in such that it's like it's a funny moment that you have a car with wings on it versus having a car that turns into a submarine, which I can actually believe a little bit more because they do make boat cars. Like that's an actual thing besides like cars that can actually drive on land and then they can actually get into the water. So to me, I'm like, I could believe in seeing like a submarine car, and the fact that the car looks cool to begin with actually helps for me. Like I'm like, the other car looks silly because it's the ugliest car they could find, and then they put wings on it with an engine. This car looks like the coolest car that they could find in 1977, and it turns into a submarine. I don't know. If someone got on if I got on a car lot and said, "Here, you get this car that flies that looks like crap and you have to add the wings, or you can get the car that turns into a submarine, looks fucking badass and shoots missiles and shit. Which one are you going to pick?" I'm going to pick the one that can swim and looks
like. I gotta assume in The Man with the Golden Gun there must have been some kind of deal with. I think it was AMC.
They all do. Like this.
And they
Nance.
just don't have cool cars.
Nance, in this movie, what literally happened was that the company that made Lotus was like, we want to pimp our car. They parked a prototype, which this car is a prototype, outside of Pinewood Studios, and the producers are walking by and like, that's a badass car. We should put that in our movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they, obviously that was the whole point. And so then they go talk to them and they're like, hey, can we put your car in the movie? Yeah.
Apparently it was lost for a long time. And some guy bought, just like Storage Wars. I don't know if you know that TV show where people auction off storage units.
Yeah, yeah.
The guy bought a storage unit for $100. The car was in there. He fixed it up and Elon Musk now owns it.
So that's the driving,
Lotus.
the hero car, the driving version of the car, right?
Yeah, whatever car was used for like press events or whatever.
Okay.
But
That's
I think
awesome.
it's like the car from
That's
the movie,
awesome.
essentially.
You guys lay out the action. Like, the action's cool. Like, that's why we're here. Like, James Bond is it's a male fantasy, and it has this cool action, and he gets the babe and all that, right? Like, that's all well and good. But the fact that it succeeds, the man with the golden gun was, hey, here's this guy who's Bond's equal but opposite. And I love that shit. This is Bond's equal but opposite, working for the Russians, who just so happens to be a sexy babe. That's cool, too. And then it just so happens that he murdered sexy babe's boyfriend.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The romance is fun. Like, at first, they're working at odds. And then, like, slowly over time, they kind of team up. And then it's, in probably one of the better scenes of the movie where he reveals, she straight up is like, did you kill him? Did you kill my ex-boyfriend? And he says, yes, I did kill him. It's also one of the funniest cuts ever where she walks out of the room and they cut to them lowering onto the sub and Bond's like,
Hey.
Like, yeah. I love that moment. Because Bond's so fucking shameless. He's like, look, babe, like, the world we live in. Like, I killed him, but like, you're banging me now. Forget about him. And she forgets about him in like 5 minutes. But like, that's where
that whole dynamic is awesome. But I did not like her. Am I the only one that didn't like her?
I'll say this about Barbara.
She's kind of a robot.
I think
I went on a survival course in Siberia.
I like the character. I like the story.
The acting is
not the strongest. I agree with you there.
Bodily warmth. Like, she's a fucking robot. She's kind of a weirdo.
Her
but
acting is very wooden.
But how would you imagine a Russian spy? They'd probably be pretty goddamn robotic.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
They're
good
program and beat into just being a physical presence and force.
To me, it gives off the vibes of they're just like, who's the hottest chick we can hire?
Yeah.
Her.
Which we know they
she
do
can't
that.
act that well. Well,
triple X.
We'll figure it out.
They're like, no one's going to be looking at her acting, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to be looking at her.
I'm like hitting play on your rant last time, McCurdy, about like your whole thing was you wanted more Scaramanga. Like, that whole Bond Scaramanga dynamic, you wanted more. And with this, I could have used more between them, and they are kind of like doing their thing the whole movie. Like, she's pretty present in the movie.
I don't completely disagree with you.
I do wish that they would have played it up a bit more. Like,
I could see that.
She's like pushing him away in the beginning, and then we have our goofy ass scene with Jaws, and then from there on, they're kind of teamed up, and like she's like all about Bond at that point.
Yeah,
and they kind of jump into bed pretty quick. I mean, that's all well and good, but like, but like then your whole thing about I killed him. Like, it's two things for me. She very quickly jumps back on Team Bond, which one could argue like whatever, like her boyfriend's dead, and clearly Bond is awesome, so like she's gonna jump to Bond. But like, but and then at the same time though, there never really is a glorious moment for Triple X. Like, there's never really a moment where you're like, F yeah, Triple X. Like, she's no Black Widow, where she doesn't even have a moment where, like, okay, remember that montage I made of like chicks kicking ass in Bond? I couldn't find one. I mean, I have one moment where the guy throws off her hat and she punches him. Other than that, Triple X really doesn't have any good moment. Like, she really doesn't.
I disagree.
Please tell me what it is.
No. It's not that she's not. Unlike Tracy, which I think Tracy's still better than this chick, but I do also like the whole story parts of this character. Yeah. But unlike Tracy, she doesn't get an action scene, but she does get to best Bond several times in this movie, where it's that fight between trying to get the microfilm. And the one time she definitely best him is when she's like, he's like, oh yeah, we're gonna now. This is gonna be great. And then he's like, here, can you light my cigarette? And then it turns out it's like
I love it.
gas cigarette.
I love that moment.
That is her moment. That's her one big moment in the movie where she best him for sure.
But he had already looked at the microfilm, so it didn't really matter. She does like trick him and knock him out.
Yeah.
But if we want Triple X to like hold her own and be like a good opposite to Bond, she could have been more helpful in that. Like she could have done something in that fight that would have been like, oh, they're working together. She's badass. Bond is badass.
But that's not what she's doing at that time. They're up against each other. Like they're at odds with each other, which I think what helps the movie.
Yeah.
And I've always said that I think conflict is always king in any film or any story, right? You want to have conflict. You want to have two people going up against each other, because if you don't have that and everyone's on the same side, the film kind of falls flat. So what helps about this movie is even though they are allies, there is that conflict there where they're up against each other, where they're fighting for the same goals, but they're on two different sides, and then it turns to like now they're allies. But that first quarter of the movie works really well because of that. And then now that you also have a formidable villain like Jaws, then you can kind of shift gears and you're like, okay, now we're up against.
I meant the fight on the train. Like right then would have been the perfect time for the shift, and that's when they do the shift.
Yeah.
But it's more like, you saved me, Bond. Now I love you. And I think it would have worked better if they were more equals in fighting. Obviously, Jaws is like crazy strong.
Not going to be.
He just knocks her out, and she's out for the fight.
Had they had a little more double team action, it would have aided their coming together. Maybe like Bond is getting choked, and she's the one who breaks the lamp and then stabs his teeth with the electricity. Like that would have been cool.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, she's just like laying in the other room. And then on top of that, what if they go to bang, or maybe after they bang and after they have sex and she has a cigarette or whatever, and Bond lights her cigarette with the burn garden, and he's like, oh, I got this in Austria or whatever, and then she puts two and two together.
Very nice.
Oh, it's Austrian. I bought it in Berngarten.
Berngarten.
Yes, I was doing some skiing.
When was this?
About 3 weeks ago. Why?
Do you think it would have helped had she realized that he had murdered her ex-lover sooner, so that could have been more of a dynamic between them for a longer portion of the film rather than right at the end? Like right at the it's like she finds that out right before they try to board the Laparis or whatever, and it doesn't really weigh in on the movie that heavily. Like it really doesn't. It's like she finds out about it, and then the next time they see each other, it's their cute little scene in the escape pod.
Another movie ending in sex on a boat thing.
Sex on a boat is back.
This one's fully stocked. There's like a full-on sex
of the
bed.
10 movies, maybe 2 haven't ended that way.
Yeah,
that's true.
Oh my god,
that's
Except
great.
This one has Perignon 52 or whatever.
Huh. Maybe I misjudged Stromberg. Any man who drinks Dom Perignon 52 can't be all bad.
Why would the bad guy want like a sexy bed escape pod?
But Charlie, you and I had talked about it, and you said
Who did anybody change the ice in my escape pod
Dolphin
today?
humanoids.
I constantly need fresh ice for my Dom Perignon 52 in the escape pod. You guys notice you didn't change it out today? You're all fired. You're all gonna get eaten by fucking sharks today because you didn't change out the ice in my fucking escape pod. God. Dolphinoids for no one today.
It's dolphinoids.
Is that it, Charlie? Is dolphinoids going to be
dolphinoids?
Is that what it's going to be under it? It's like The Spy Who Loved Me. Dolphinoids.
Less shutters, more dolphinoids.
Less shutters, more dolphinoids.
More dolphinoids.
It's not even in the movie. It's just something we made up.
Yeah.
Now that would get some views because people are like, what the f***?
Oh no, it's dolphumanoids.
Dolphumanoids.
Well, I almost prefer dolphinoids.
Yeah, but it's a dolphin human hybrid.
Dolphumanoid is like 20 gens in.
Dolphumanoid. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine a more intelligent race than mankind fucking dolphins to make dolphumanoids? That's how we would. That's what I mean. What, you're just gonna live in pods? Are you gonna just breathe air No, you have to make dolphumanoids so that the
Charlie.
human race can exist underwater.
I have to ask you this question, Charlie. I have to ask you this question.
What?
Were you high when you watched this movie? because the idea of you being like, no, the motivation is dolphumanoids sounds like something someone would say if they were like really high and they were talking to their friends. Like, yeah, man, it's the dolphumanoids.
Dude,
that's what's
I'm
happening.
telling you, I sat in the corner, stone cold sober, and I thought, what could possibly be in it for everybody going forward with Waterworld?
Oh my God.
What, you're gonna live underwater, living in these little habitats where you're still breathing air? No, that. You start fucking dolphins.
That
to
makes
have
sense.
this hybrid species of the intelligence of humans, apes from the the above world land, mating with the dolphins of the new water world, where it's like there's a legend where the humans, they came from the upward world up above the water world, and they came down to the depths of the new sea world to the dolphins and create us, the dolphumanoids, who will take over space itself. What's that? It's above the land into the sky world space of space, really where there is no water. There is no
Charlie.
Air. There is only space world and the dolphumanoids.
I need this
who
speech.
Run everything. McCurdy was like, the man with the golden gun. I wanted more man with the golden gun, and I'm like pretty satisfied with it. Whereas with this, I'm like, I just a little. They had that material to play with, and I just wanted a little bit more. You know.
No, I don't. Here's the weird thing. I don't disagree with you, but I also think that these movies, again, we're talking about. These movies are built for spectacle. They weren't really focused on story for at least these first couple films. And then when they do focus on story, it's only a little bit. And then the one time they focused a lot on story, the movie didn't do as well. So that being said, though, I do still think that, like, even though, I'm on board with you as far as like, I wish they played with it more. I like what you're pitching to me as far as like the lighting the cigarette and all that stuff. That would have been cool, right? But it still doesn't weigh the movie down for me as much because I'm like, it's still spectacle-wise, still great. It still has a skosh of story that even references another film that even adds to Bond as a character instead of him just being some wooden, like, I'm a super spy. Like, oh, wait, no, he's a super spy with like a dark, like a past that like affected him to his core, as well as I'm facing someone who's my equal, who's on the other side of during the Cold War and all this stuff. And then on top of all of that, we've got this guy who wants to fuck fish. So, which is totally headcanon, which is totally headcanon, but I do love games like BioShock. So like when you're talking about all this stuff, it reminds me of that. But that's why to me it's a 3.
She is Bond's equal but opposite within Russian intelligence. And that's why it is kind of fun. It harkens back to my whole rant about how Bond is a know-it-all, and usually M is like, "Shut up, Bond. You're so sexy and intelligent, and everybody likes you."
So it's not oratory; it's laboratory. Stromberg has a marine research laboratory on Corsica, I believe.
Well done, James.
Actually, sir, it is in Sardinia.
And it's like my know-it-all versus your know-it-all, to the point where M's like, good job, 007, but then Triple X bests him, and he's like, you're supposed to be a know-it-all. The one time you're not a know-it-all, the Russians are here. I will say this, though. Did you guys catch there's a very interesting moment where M's name is revealed? Did y'all catch this?
No, I didn't.
Okay, it's very brief. It's very subtle.
Yeah. After you, Alexis.
Oh, no, after you, Miles.
Oh, thank you.
After you, Miles. And M says, oh, thank you, Russian, Gogol guy. Like, and I was like, M's name is Miles? Like, maybe that's in the books. I don't know. But like, Gogol definitely calls him out. And then, and even Triple X calls Q Major Boothroyd, so it's like, everybody's getting real friendly, detente as This movie is ramping up Q. It's like they're starting to realize the people want Q. Q is awesome. Q is all over this movie. He shows up constantly, and it's great.
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't fucking love Q?
I would have Q examined after that weird little jet ski thing, though.
Yeah.
Q, are you sure this isn't cool at all, Q?
Q, this hasn't aged well. Can we get something
this isn't
sexier?
like the helicopter. The helicopter. Okay, good job on the helicopter.
You have to
The jet
assemble
ski
it.
thing.
That's dinky.
It was small and it worked. Okay, guys.
It worked.
Yeah.
Can't
It worked.
fault it for that. I guess.
It looked. You know what? Hold on. It looked better than the giant bubble that he he lands on in Diamonds Are Forever, where he's in that giant bubble and he has to like crawl his way through the sea. This time it's like here's a tiny little jet ski that you can get you from one place to the other super fast. And he's like,
Can
cool.
you imagine
Vroom, 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 let's
how
go.
fucking sweaty Roger Moore would have been if he had to gerbil his whole way like miles through the ocean, rolling for days on end?
He's like, hey,
Bond, you only have an hour.
He's like, make it
I'm
2
almost
hours.
there. Yeah. Give me another week.
I mean, it's not the silliest thing that I've seen in any of these movies so far. I mean, what I think takes me out of it is just that you have all the logos and stuff on it, and I'm like,
Yeah, maybe if it was black instead of like a looking
like it had all the logos, so it's like trying to be a
a
product placement.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
the 70s,
Which, by the way, that kind of reminds me of like at that moment you get the Bond theme. It's like the Bond theme is back.
Mm-hmm.
It's like where's the Bond theme
Perfectly
been for
used
the
in
last
this film.
couple movies, and now it's back. Like they use it several times. Now they use it briefly. It's almost like they wanted to get away from it, and then it's like after the slide whistle, they're like, we need to bring it back. We need fucking Bond theme back.
For me, I think this movie, the more we're talking about it, places it somewhere between 2 and 3 for me.
I'm gonna stick to 4. I still think that the story of the Man with the Golden Gun does it for me, but I think that this is just it's such a solid super spy movie. Like, sure, it's got some goofy stuff. I think again that whole sequence with Jaws randomly driving out in the middle of nowhere is stupid, and like cut that out and the movie improves.
Mm-hmm.
So super spy wise, like again, we have our like serious From Russia with Love versus our like goofy fun Goldfinger. This is like straight up goofy fun Goldfinger. It's literally a remake of You Only Live Twice, and we all agree that You Only Live Twice is good. It just suffered some things that this movie fixed, and the scope is big. And like the whole Atlantis stuff is really cool, a lot of fun. But like overall, when it comes to things like story and bad guy, it's like it's above Dr. No for me again for that like scope, story, and bad guy. But it's below The Man with the Golden Gun because of story and bad guy.
I still think it's better story-wise
with this.
than The Man with the Golden Gun. And I also think because of the spectacle and some of the goofy moments are all balanced, it doesn't feel like a tonally weird movie where you have serious scenes mixed with like unserious scenes, but it's like it's played well. Like
you don't have a dojo scene in the middle of things.
It actually questions something about the Bond universe as far as like Bond kills a lot of henchmen. These henchmen have families or people or loved ones. Like, where does that fill? And yes, it doesn't get it. You know, we don't explore it as much as I think I wish we could have explored it. At least it's there, but it's there enough that we're not like, it's not so heavy-handed and it's not so like dramatic, because this movie's a fun movie that you can take your kids to still.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, that's why to me it's like a 3.
We talked about like, how would they make The Man with the Golden Gun today? Like, oh, it'd be darker, and it would be like totally pitting these two guys against each other, and they would get rid of any superfluous stuff. They'd get rid of the dojo. They'd get rid of the popcorn stuff, right?
But there's a lot of it.
And same with this movie, that like they would get rid of, there'd be none of this goofy stuff, and it would just be all like just imagine it in your mind. Take like Daniel Craig universe and like apply it to the water. And like this insane guy who wants to like bring about Waterworld and Dolphumanoid.
And it would be like a crazy Jeff Bezos who creates an Amazon facility underwater with dolphin fish.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, but we still live in popcorn world and like family fun world and like spectacle world, and I I think like I am satisfied by the story with the man with golden gun. I'm somewhat satisfied with the Spy Who Loved Me story. Like I do think there could have been more there, and they still could have fit it within this world where it is like family friendly and all that. And that's like between that and the bad guy, that's where it's like I do think this movie is a lot of fun, and it's high quality, and it's big. But it's like we're just having the same argument from last time where it's like
because
it's just
the
man
last
with the golden
movie
gun
is not a
versus
good
this.
movie, and you're just nuts. Like you're like
sure.
To me you're like this. You're like these two heavy things. Scaramanga. Oh, I love Scaramanga so much, but goofy shit over here because we got this goofy crazy thing. But I'm not going to look at that. I'm not looking at the goofy stuff.
They're both goofy.
I'm not
They're
looking
both
at the goofy
goofy.
stuff. I'm not looking at the goofy stuff.
Okay, if they're both
this
goofy,
movie,
if they're both
is
goofy,
like this.
cut
This
out
movie
the
is
goofy,
balanced.
and
The
then what do you
goofy-
have left? If you don't have goofy, you have the story of him and Triple X.
There's not much
versus
there,
the
dude.
story
there
of
really
him
isn't
and
much there. There's
Scaramanga.
maybe like 15 minutes of screen time if
That's-
you cut out all the goofy shit in that last movie.
I disagree. They have the same amount of goofy shit. Now Bond doesn't shit out a bullet in this movie. I'll give you that. But
is there a slide whistle?
No, McCurdy.
Is there
there's
a car
no
with wings on
slide.
it? Is there a midget with paint on his face? Is there a goofy carnival scene? Is there
all things
These
you
are
don't
all
like that
way
we
goofier
like?
things.
That we like.
Is
Nobody
there a
likes
badass
this
car that can go underwater that you would probably drive if you owned one?
Let's be serious though. When it
I'm
comes
being
down
serious.
to cutting out the goofy stuff, what story do you have? You have this like somewhat weakened romance that like works, but like probably like definitely could have had more. And then you have Scaramanga's badass shit. So like that's where I'm at.
I still to this day really believe this, Charlie. I think you growing up with GoldenEye has turned your eyes to being like, I have the golden gun from GoldenEye. It's great. I also really love Lord of the Rings, and Christopher Lee is great. And
I'm
for
the
some
guy
reason,
who
you have
said
convinced
I'm the guy
yourself
who
that
said I don't give
Golden
a f about GoldenEye.
You have convinced
I think
yourself that
GoldenEye is like
Christopher
one of the
Lee's
most overrated
performance
video
is
games
the best
ever.
movie
Anybody
ever.
still saying like that's what I said to you guys,
That
where you're
is-
like
that is
Oddjob
why
is
I
so
think you
awesome,
think
and
that
I'm like,
movie's so
you
good.
only like Oddjob because he was in GoldenEye. GoldenEye, it's like Citizen Kane. It's been fucking surpassed.
didn't play GoldenEye
Hey Charlie,
as
do you
a
want to play
kid.
GoldenEye? No, I want to play Halo. I don't ever want to play GoldenEye ever again because it's lame. Because it's been surpassed by. If they remade it, that'd be cool. But
They did, actually.
Beyond that, well, they
did remake that game.
Yeah, they made a different game though. They didn't remake GoldenEye
Yeah,
as it is.
I know.
So
I know.
like, no, I reject that. I think the Golden Gun is fucking awesome, but not because it was in GoldenEye. I think GoldenEye is an old video game that nobody should be playing anymore. But when it comes down to it, Scaramanga has a really fun relationship not only with his henchmen but with Bond too. Whereas with this, you have this Soviet spy who never really does anything awesome. The blowing the smoke in the face is like her moment. But other than that, she's bland, she's robotic, she's kind of eh. And I love the tension created by Bond having murdered her ex, but it doesn't do anything with it. Whereas the stuff with Scaramanga has his payoff where it's like, I want to fucking duel to the death. Mano y mano, a duel of titans. My golden gun versus your Walther PPK. That fucking trumps this whole goddamn movie for me.
No, in a carnival, in a fun house, in a carnival fun house,
controlled
that's
by
where
a
that fight ends
midget!
up. In a carnival fun house with mannequins.
Yes.
That's where this movie ends.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You're nuts.
I will
You are nuts.
I'm not
You
as
want to
nuts
suck
as
Christopher Lee's
Stromberg who
cock
wants
so bad.
Dolphumanoids. I mean,
I'm totally okay with the dolphin
Okay,
crap.
I think we're getting
Sure.
lost in the previous argument and movie. I think we should get back to ranking this one.
let's hear from these
Scott,
two knuckleheads.
Yes,
what do you guys
please.
On the points, you and Ann's made good points about Triple X. She is robotic. The acting isn't brilliant. They could have been better. I guess, as you said, what did you say? If she knew that Bond killed her lover earlier, It might have created a better dynamic. There could have been more points where they worked together to bring down bad guys instead of it just always being Bond saving her. So I'll agree with that. That brings it down.
She's the best of the best, and she doesn't do much with that.
And I will agree with the goofiness somewhat. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't think I'm fully with you guys on Jaws. But I do agree that scene was kind of strange in a way, and its setup and how it finished. So I'll bring it down a bit, but I think I'm going to settle with McCurdy at 3.
Okay.
I don't think I'm going to go lower than that.
Yeah. Well, just like all the other movies, this is my first time watching this movie, and I think Char, you've kind of brought it up, and it's definitely the case for me where I've been spoiled by Daniel Craig's Bond movies, and I think I want to, I'm gonna say it, I guess. I want a darker Bond, but I want, a more focused story on Bond. I don't like all the extravaganza that goes on with You Only Live Twice, and in this movie, I want a focused story on Bond and a bad guy. And if you're gonna throw a girl in there too, that's fine, but she better, be a good character. And this movie has a whole lot of other stuff in it. I enjoy parts of it. I also find a lot of it goofy, and I don't like the humor goofiness that we get. Again, that goes, I guess, being spoiled with Daniel Craig. There's almost no goofiness in those movies. So yeah, I mean, I'm struggling, I guess. I know I mentioned initially, I'm thinking number 8 or something, but I did also kind of think maybe closer to 4 or 5 range.
All right,
I just
so
McCurdy's
McCurdy's holding
3s, 2 4s.
Yeah, McCurdy's holding at 3. Scott's holding at 3. I'm holding at 4. So it sounds like it doesn't really matter, Nans. So let me say this.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly it needs to be at the bottom, but I'm on your boat where I want a better bad guy, and I don't like Stromberg all that much.
Here's the thing. If it, again, removing the goofiness, because both movies have goofy. They both have goofy, regardless of amount of goofy, whatever. Throw that out. What you're left with is you have XXX, who, again, in this movie becomes, just like Scaramanga was Bond's equal but opposite, this is now equal and opposite within Russian intelligence, and literal opposite in terms of penis turning into a vagina. So removing goofiness, you have Bond and his relationship with XXX, and then you have Bond and his relationship with Scaramanga, and then you have Bond and his relationship with this, Stromberg is, I think objectively speaking, Stromberg is a weaker bad guy. If it's not going to be Scaramanga versus Stromberg, where clearly Scaramanga is going to win. Again, objectively speaking, Scaramanga is a stronger bad guy than Stromberg, who has he's just insane, and he has these followers for some reason. I like that the stakes of The Man with the Golden Gun are limited to just Bond's reputation versus this You Only Live Twice rehash of East and West destroying each other, Russia and the US going to war.
On that point, I felt like there was a lot of recycling in this movie.
Yeah, on the other hand, you just have Bond's reputation, and I like that. For me personally, the stakes just being Bond's reputation, I think that's really cool. Now, to level with you guys, with McCurdy and Scott, I could bend so far as the whole Goodnight thing. Again, my whole thing, I was not trying to defend Goodnight just to push the movie. I think that without rehashing that argument, I think Goodnight is she's a bimbo, but she always pulls through. We don't need to rehash that whole thing. I don't think she gets enough credit, but she still is annoying versus this relationship with a more capable babe. Yeah. But again, I wish that XXX had offered more. I mean, she really didn't offer that much. Throughout the whole movie, she really doesn't do that much. So it's like help me out here because you have
Yeah, I mean,
you have
there's
you
a
have
lot
Triple
more
X and
interesting
Goodnight,
dynamic there.
and then you have Stromberg and Scaramanga. I think Triple X and Goodnight are both kind of weak compared to what they could have been. So all I'm left with is Scaramanga and Stromberg. And I do think that The Spy Who Loved Me is really strong, so I honestly wouldn't care if it was above The Man with the Golden Gun, but
I think with if you want to argue Triple X versus Miss Goodnight,
please.
Comes down to competence for one. Like, yes, we've gone through the argument, but
yeah.
let me throw some more credit to Triple X.
Please.
At least with Triple X, we do get the sense that she gets a great intro. She gets, and that intro, remember, it's like we see a guy and a girl.
It's a little misdirection.
There's a great misdirection where you think, like, if you didn't know, if you hadn't seen the movie, and you're like, okay, get me Triple X, get Triple X on the phone.
Yeah.
And then we see this guy, and that's what the camera's focusing on, is this guy with this hot broad, and you're thinking, oh, this is the Russian James Bond. And then this phone thing goes off, and then he's like, it's for you. And then you instantly know, oh, she's Triple X.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got all the really great work. Like, even though she may not do physicality, like, and that is something that is missing. I'm not going to deny that she doesn't have physicality.
Beyond that,
in this movie.
I don't care about physicality. She never really does anything otherwise.
No, I mean, she has great, and I think she has better wordplay with Bond, though. And she even hits a nerve with him at one point where she's like, you were married once, and then she's like, we're not going to talk about that. And like, that was the moment where we're like, oh my God, like that back and forth. Like I remember the last movie we were talking about, it's like, well, he should know who, because the assassins and all the assassins would know who they are and everything. But like, this is a really great scene because you know for a fact that Russia and the West, I should say, like the East and the West are spying on each other, and they should know each other's secrets, and we get a lot of that.
The lady'll have a Bacardi on the rocks.
For the gentleman, vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Touche.
And then there's even that great moment with the Lotus where it's like, wait, how did you know how to do that? And she's like, well, I stole the plans of this for 2 years ago, so I already know about this thing. Like, there's all of those really great moments. With Goodnight, you don't have that. You just have a very obnoxious character that, like, runs around the screen, just trying to bang Bond, but not really, and then, like, gets in the way. At least this is, like, she's getting in the way because she's at conflict. She's trying to get the microfilm, and it's like, oh, there's motivation there. There's, like, a character dynamic. There's, like, conflict.
Like, undoubtedly, Triple X is a better character than Goodnight. But I wish they would have done more with Triple X than just have her be there. I wish they would have done more with
Scaramanga, but
you know. But I'm still satisfied by Scaramanga. With Triple X, it's like there are clearly ways that she could have been like instantly made better, like instantly. So
like,
that's where I'm
I know you like to hang
up.
your hat on Story as like the king of all these movies, but again, I'm gonna go back and say, like, yeah, you're looking at that one thing over here, but remember, like, this is a Bond movie, this is an action movie. I want to see action. I feel like the action in the last movie is really undercut because we get to the end of the movie and it's like the producer's like, oh crap, we kind of wrote ourselves in a corner here. We have this duel thing, but we don't have any cool explosions. Now, if this was the darker movie that you and I had talked about, where it's like, oh, well, this would be the Daniel Craig Bond film, like, then that would have worked. That would have worked. But this movie, it was like, we wrote ourselves in a corner. Oh, crap, what do we do? Oh, the solar panels and generators, and they blow up, and that's the end of the movie, and then they can go off, and Bond could get caught.
You're saying that the ending is more organic with the destruction of Atlantis.
It's like this movie. It's like
that's true.
It's a Bond movie. Like you want to discredit all the spectacle, but the spectacle, it's weight. It is weight because that is what I go. If I'm going to go see a Bond movie, I don't want to see people sitting in rooms and talking about their pistols. I want to see action scenes. I want to see really great action scenes. This movie has, again, like the best car action scene we've seen in any movie, and not to mention that it goes from air to land to sea, and there's just a huge dynamic there. We get some great fight scenes. We get a great hench villain. Like, I know we were talking about the Egyptian scene, and I'm not keen on that scene, but we also get the great sequence in the
it's like you got your way now really with like going from with Knick Knack, you were like like Knick Knack is just, it's a midget to have a midget, and my whole thing was like, it's not a midget just to have a midget, it's more about he's more like Yoda, he kind of is using his brain with these, like, how he's controlling
Yeah.
the funhouse and everything. And then when they have their showdown, it's like 2 seconds because Bond's just like he tries to get Bond by surprise. And the moment that fails, Knick-Knack's fucked. And we all know he's fucked. Whereas with Jaws, Bond more has to triumph against this, like, massive dude.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly Jaws is the shit. So, like, really what it comes to, like everything you just laid out is probably enough to elevate it above The Man with the Golden Gun. Again, for me personally, the story of The Man with the Golden Gun is smaller, it's more personal, that gives me a boner. But I understand everything you're saying so far as, like, when in terms of bondiness, like we talked about, we here and there we talk about, like, a good movie versus a good Bond movie. And so far as this movie is concerned, it still, I mean, it still has those elements of Reputation, because it's like, here's the best of the Brits versus the best of the Russians and how they team up. Like, all those elements are there. All the action is there. Jaws is fucking awesome. Stromberg is still cool. Like, I still like him. I think Scaramanga is just, like, still the top bad guy, but that wasn't even enough to get him at the top of the list, because Auric Goldfinger is still awesome. So, like, so I see it.
I was going to say quick, I mean, McCurdy finally brought it there as we were sinking back towards Bond girl versus Bond girl, bad guy versus bad guy. And that's what we always seem to retract to,
because
when
they're
we're trying
hard
to make a
elements
decision.
that you can compare.
Well, I know, but
yeah.
McCurdy finally brought it there, is that for this one, it's the balance and the spectacle.
Yeah.
That lifts this one above the individual story of bad guy versus good guy.
The fact that the scene of Bond falling in the air and his parachute opens up and we get the fucking Bond theme, which we feel like we haven't heard in forever.
Yeah.
This is a fucking Bond movie. This is what I came to go see.
I'm cool with it. I'm down to go with Spy Who Loved Me at number 3.
Yeah. I mentally conceded that probably 10, 15 minutes ago. If you rewind, I don't want people thinking I just follow what Charlie thinks. I came up with this decision before Charlie said he's fine with 3. If you rewind the footage of my webcam here, you'll see I've been stewing hard for like 10, 15, 20 minutes.
I've noticed.
And really, obviously, like, McCurdy, you made great points. I heard most of them, but I was really in my own world thinking. And it was Charlie, you got me thinking. You said take both movies, remove, like, the silliness out of them. And I kind of did that, but mostly I compared the silliness between The Man with the Golden Gun and this film. And it got me thinking that there's more
There's more silliness in The Man with the Golden Gun.
The Man with the Golden Gun, there's big chunks of silliness.
Yeah.
This one, for me, there was a lot of silliness. I noticed it. It bothered me. But it was more like a joke here, a joke there. Nothing that really made a huge impact. The whole, like, dojo, like, karate school thing in The Man with the Golden Gun is not great.
Yeah.
I do not like that Louisville cop guy. I forget his name. Not Louisville.
J.W.
Louisiana.
J.W. Peppa.
I don't love him. And yeah, I do think 3 makes sense. And I'm gonna look like such a volatile opinion and easily swayed person, but coming in as this is my first time viewing this movie person, I think it's important for you guys to do what you've done and, like, lay it all out there. But again, I think comparing the silliness between The Man with the Golden Gun and this film is what made me kind of change where I'm placing it.
When it comes down to just overall, like, again, this is like attempt number 2 at the plot of You Only Live Twice, and it's just they learned all the lessons from You Only Live Twice, they fixed them, and then you throw in the fun little relationship between these the two top agents of Britain and Russia, and then you throw in Jaws, and again, there's more to be desired from everybody between Jaws, XXX, and Stromberg, but what we got was still cool and fun. This is a solid Bond movie. This is where it's like, is it a good movie or a good Bond movie? This is where it's like a solid Bond movie. It's got the best skiing. I mean, the skiing scene is awesome, and then it ends in one of the best prologue, and it's definitely the best prologue ender so far. I like the song, but I think the opening of the song is really weak. How cool would it have been if it had gone into like, You Know My Name or something? Like, I'm gonna cut that in too. Bang!
Eyes I'm deceived. I've seen angels fall from blinding heights, but you yourself are nothing so divine. Just next to line on yourself because no one else here will save you.
This is really kind of the first time that the name of the song is not the title of the movie necessarily, even though it has the title of the movie in the song.
Mm-hmm.
So, Scott, to me, where do you place Nobody Does It Better, the theme to The Spy Who Loved Me?
I'd probably put it somewhere. I don't actually have it ranked right now. I haven't been keeping up with that. I should get back to it, but I'd put it somewhere in the middle. I think it's a song that actually similar to The Man with the Golden Gun works better as background scoring for the movie than it did as an actual opening sequence.
Yes.
Like this song did brilliantly when they were riding the camels through the desert, when he arrived there. Like, this song works so well in the background, just like the Man with the Golden Gun song. Which
it
was
made a
titled
great
The Man
Chinese
with the Golden
theme.
Gun, right?
Like The Man with the Golden Gun was like a fantastic
and it worked very
Chinese
well in
theme.
the background as scoring, but it
This
wasn't
is like a good romantic score.
Yeah, it didn't blow it away as just a Bond intro song.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Neither one are top of the list when it comes to like the best ones you think of, but both of these worked brilliantly in the background.
If I'm not mistaken, I think this song may have won an Academy Award, but
it was nominated but didn't win.
In 2004, it was honored by the American Film Institute as the 67th greatest song as part of their 100 Years series. Because it was used in films like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Little Black Book, Lost in Translation, and Bridget Jones.
Okay.
It's been used in a ton of films, so it's lasted through the years.
There's nothing better than the explosive Bond opening, and that's what they become later. It's like mandatory that they like when that song starts, you better be fucking jacked up. Whereas I think the opening of this song is really boring and lame. But then you get into it. Like as soon as you hear the lyrics, "The Spy Who Loved Me," that's where I'm like, oh, this song's good. But when it opens, like with that like cradling of the parachute, I'm always like, oh, it's a lame Bond song. And then later I'm like a couple minutes later, I'm like, oh wait, this song's good. But always when I see that cradling, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go take a piss.
I like the intro for me because I like the because it's a piano. It's a piano in the beginning, right? It's like
it's a light piano.
Because it reminds. So we hit the badass like parachute opens and we get the Bond theme,
so
and
it's
then we
subtle.
slowly drift into the next song. But when he's slowly drifting that song, it's the and it's kind of like it kind of reminds me of a cartoon where it's like something floating down slowly.
Yeah, but
and
it
so
does
I feel
not.
like it works
but it does
well.
not hit a light piano like Skyfall hits a light piano.
No, I mean it's not
like
Skyfall,
sinking,
but
that's it.
For me, it's like one of the better songs for me, but it's not something where I'm like, no, this is the best one. You know what I mean?
This song has grown on me quite a bit. It is one of those that the more you listen to it, you're like, all right, it is a very good song.
Yeah.
But once again, I think it worked better as background scoring for the film more than it did as like an iconic intro.
We are locked in now. We are still at Goldfinger, the fucking Goldfinger at number 1. From Russia with Love, number 2. The Spy Who Loved Me, number 3. The Man with the Golden Gun, number 4. Dr. No at number 5. Honor Majesty's Secret Service, number 6. Thunderball at number 7. Live and Let Die, number 8. Number 9, Diamonds Are Forever. Number 10, You Only Live Twice. Still just at the bottom. But you've been bested, bitch, by a remake that's not space, it's water. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, McCurdy, you want to play us out again?
I was going to let Scott do his better. It's got better car chase, better shutters.
Better tits. I mean,
better
Naomi.
Tits.
God, Naomi has the best. Oh,
get out,
Naomi.
No, I think what it does for me with her is like when you see her,
both of them.
You know how it is. It's like women look differently by different periods as far as like beauty and like how, you know, whatever. But when you say Naomi, it's like she's almost timeless because I'm like, damn, like she looks like you could pull her out, put her in 2019, 2020, 21, whatever.
Yes,
she'd still fit.
Oh
like
my
you would
God,
still be like,
yes.
yeah. You would
Plus
see
she
her
can
walking down the
Maybe that's why I
don't know, it's
drool
weird.
so much over her.
All right,
anyway,
play it out.
So I'll play it out. So this one goes to Shane. I'm going to say it twice because I want to make sure I have the name right.
Okay.
Reimer or Reamer? What do you think? It's Rimmer. Rimmer?
Rimmer.
So this one goes to Shane Rimmer, a 3-time Bond alumni who recently had passed away in the last couple of years. Here's to Shane.
To Shane.
To Shane.
The go-to American.
The Rent-A-Yank.
The Rent-A-Yank.
That's Canadian.
Nobody does me better. Makes me feel sad for the rest. Nobody does it half as good as you. Baby, you're the best.